Welcome to It's Happening in Grand Prairie. We're so delighted that you have joined us on our public access Channel 10. And on July the 6th, we hope that you'll remain with us. We have several very exciting guests and some very important announcements to make. If you'd like to have your own television show and work with Channel 10, please mark your calendar for this coming Saturday, July the 9th, for there will be a production workshop at that time at 10 o'clock in the morning at Store Cable TV on Dickey Road and Carrier Parkway. Please come and take this course, and then you'll be eligible to work with the equipment furnished by Store Cable TV. You can even have your own show, do your own production, and we would welcome you and invite you and encourage you to come to the workshop this coming Saturday. Call 263-1617 for a reservation for a place at the workshop. We're just so delighted to have several very important guests this evening, but first of all, we have a runner with us. You know, the 4th of July, you always have the runners as far as the fireworks are concerned. And Vera Jinks, how delightful it is to have you on It's Happening in Grand Prairie just one more time. And I know the countdown is running very close for Miss Grand Prairie. And we, Mr. Young, the Reverend Young, and I would like for you to tell us a little bit about the latest thing that's going on in Fort Worth.
Okay. Last Sunday, 82 contestants arrived in Fort Worth to compete for the title of Miss Texas. So Miss Grand Prairie last night competed in the swimsuit competition, and tonight she's going to compete in evening dress competition, and Thursday night she's going to do her talent competition.
I see.
Oh.
And her talent is piano, isn't it?
Yes, she is. She's a concert pianist.
I see.
Oh, that's going to be so exciting. Well, now tell us a little bit about some of the things that happened last evening. Do you know the winners or anything on that portion of it?
Yes, the talent winner was Miss Duncanville, and she also is a pianist. And the swimsuit winner was Miss H.E.B.
That's Hurst, Euless, Bedford, and all of the good things.
Yes,
I
sure.
see. Well, I know that you think that our Pamela O'Brien scored pretty good on swimsuit. The way you all have been working with her lately, she was really shaped up when she left Grand Prairie the other day.
She sure was. She's been working very hard for several months trying to get in shape to go to Miss Texas.
Well, what are they doing this evening, Vera? Do you know?
Yes, they were going to take them out to eat this afternoon at 4:30. They will bring them back about 6:30 to go to the convention center to compete. And it does start at 8 o'clock, and it was over last night about 11:30.
Have you been going back and forth, Vera, each day and working with her? You're her host or guardian, or how does that work?
Tell him your title.
Okay, I'm president of the Miss Grand Prairie Scholarship Pageant Association, and I have been staying in Fort Worth this week. I have been back once or twice this week, but I'm staying over there this week.
Quite exciting. Mr. Magnus, I went to college when he did, and he's really into that. He really enjoys that. That's built up to quite a pageant.
Yes, it is.
Now, the Reverend Young should call in some of his aces as far as knowing Magnus and maybe get in on judging some of these pageants, shouldn't he, Vera?
I'll have to tell him tonight or tomorrow that I saw you and tell him.
Yeah, well, we knew them years ago there, and when it was just a small pageant and it's built up now, I imagine he has an armed guard to keep you all away from him. All the doting scholarship participants want to be the winner, I guess.
No, he's very available to everybody.
Oh,
you
isn't that
see him
great?
at all and talk to. You know, he talks to everybody.
I'd like to know, have they had their personal interviews yet, Vera, as far as the judges are concerned, one-on-one?
Yes, Miss Grand Prairie had her interview yesterday afternoon about 1:30, and I believe they finished up all the rest of the girls this afternoon.
All right, now we'd like for you to look out into the camera and invite our audience, those that could come over and maybe pick up tickets there at the place, because we know that there are none available here in Grand Prairie, nor none available, I understand, for the Saturday night television production. But I'd like for you to invite the general public to come over if they can one night and watch our Miss Grand Prairie.
Okay, there are tickets still available for tonight and Thursday night and Friday night. It's at 8 o'clock at the Tarrant County Convention Center.
Good. And do you happen to know the price of the tickets, or are they different prices?
They're different prices every night. They're $5.20 for tonight and tomorrow night. They are $8.20 for Friday night.
I see. And on Saturday night, none are available, but
No.
if you happen to go over there and someone cancels out, you might luck out on a place, do you think?
That's right. And I believe those tickets are $9 for Saturday night.
Oh,
And
that's
since
good.
we're on public TV, we'll not say that the Saturday night, I think they do have some exposure on that other medium, do they not?
Yes, they do. They're going to have to be on prime time television this time from 8 until 10 this year.
Oh, that sounds so very exciting. All right, now, are you going to invite them maybe to send a note to Miss Green Prairie, or a card, or a flower, or a telegram, or?
We would love for anybody that would like to wish her well to send one to the Americana Hotel, and that's at 200 Main Street in Fort Worth. And just put Miss Green Prairie, Pam O'Brien.
And that's PAMELAO''BRIANT. Our very own Miss Grand Prairie, Pamela O'Brien, who will be in evening gown competition on July the 7th, talent July the 8th,
Right.
and then she's going to rest on July the 9th, and then on the 10th they're going to have the big deal of the day, which is the televised final program, and then we'll find out how our Miss Grand Prairie fares in the Miss Texas pageant. And Vera, it's so wonderful to have you on our show, and we'd like to thank you for the many hours that you have given in helping to prepare Pamela for this great big talent, and for it's an all year long preparation, I know, being the president of the Miss Grand Prairie division of the Chamber of Commerce. And that's just wonderful to have you with us, and we thank you for being with the Reverend Bob and I, as he is our co-host this evening. And
Vera, they started really the competition in January, and then since then you've really been all the time, and every public event you all have been to, have you not?
yes.
Right. And up until April, she usually goes to a pageant every weekend to represent our city. So
I see.
That's
been
marvelous.
very busy since February.
Well, maybe, you know, they have to come from somewhere, so maybe this
Exactly.
year they'll come from Grand Prairie.
I hope so.
I do too, and for you, and get some sleep next week
I sure will.
after all the hard work.
Vera, we'd like to thank Johnny Jinks for allowing you to go over and spend so much time there, because I know you do help him some in his business. And thanks to Johnny, and thanks to Vera. And say a prayer for our Miss Pamela O'Brien in the Miss Texas competition. She has a marvelous talent, and we'll be right back with our next guest.
Plumber as thyself. Well, we all want to be loved, so don't be surprised if you see bumper stickers reading, love thy beautician as thyself, or paperboy, postman. The list is endless. Jesus said, love thy neighbor as thyself. Now that's all inclusive. Everyone is our neighbor, and our neighborhood is as big as all the world.
Thank you for staying with us for the remainder of our show, and we're just very excited about our next two guests. As we told you, the Reverend Bob Young, who is the minister at the First United Methodist Church, is our co-host. But now we're having him as a very special guest this evening, and he's going to tell us about the wearing of another hat. The Reverend Young has recently been elected and installed as the new president of the Grand Prairie Rotary Club. And this is a very exciting club in our town. And Mr. Bob Young, we're just delighted to have you with us, President.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ruthie. It's good to be here and to say a word about the Rotary Club. As you know, it's been 44 years in Grand Prairie, and our charter president, Dewey Miller, is still around and very much active in our club. Rotary began 73 years ago, I believe it was, in Chicago, when Mr. Paul Harris decided to eat lunch with 3 business associates. And as they ate lunch with each other and shared ideas about understanding and marketing and service to the community, one of them suggested at the end, well, why don't we do this again next week? And so, as they say on TV, the rest is history. And so our club, in 44 years that it's been in existence, has been involved in community betterment, peace and understanding, international scholarships, the whole bit that service clubs do. And so I'm glad to be here tonight and be the 45th president, I guess, of the Grand Prairie Rotary Club. You only have it for a year, and it comes and goes, and so now I'm it. you'll be next one of these days here, young man.
Well, the exciting thing about this is you absolutely meet weekly, and if you miss one of those, they send you off to Arlington or Irving or, I believe, around the world so that you won't miss anything and will have perfect attendance. Is this true?
Well, that's one of the features of Rotary besides the fellowship and the interaction and community service. They often say you can miss church, but you can't miss Rotary. I prefer that both of those would be in that high category, but the way Rotary has one of the requirements in your attendance, that if you are to miss your own local club, and ours meets on Friday at the Veterans Memorial Center, then you have 6 days prior or 6 days afterward to make up in another Rotary club. And of course that gives you a chance to meet with other business and professional people in nearby cities. As a matter of fact, we could make up every day at noon in Arlington or in Irving or in Oak Cliff or nearby, and that helps you in your understanding of how the other men are doing in their communities. And so, yes, that is one of the high requirements of Rotary is attendance.
Well, President Young, I see that you have a very special guest with you this evening, and since he is usually not only behind camera, but off in the control room behind the mixer, it's very unusual that we would have him on camera, and I'm so glad that you brought him this evening, but I know there must be a special reason why we would have him out on this side of the camera.
I would not want to go into all the special reasons. Dan and I haven't seen each other since noon, and then we were in a 3-hour meeting together last night. But one of the things that the community often thinks about Rotary is that a bunch of old men that meet on Friday noon and they eat and burp and go home and don't do anything.
I see.
And we've come up in the recent days, and I'd have to say this, that our charter president, Dewey, has been really involved in this, and that is getting more of the young men of the community and getting them involved, and then by subscription or sustaining scholarships, making them what we call Paul Harris Fellows, which essentially means that $1,000 has gone to the Rotary Foundation for scholarships and peace and understanding, also for scholarships for teaching handicapped children and other things. And so Dan Clemson, a young man that you have met somewhere along the line here, Dan received one of these the other night along with 2 marshals. He had to have a marshal on either side of him. Marshal Sutton Jr. and Marshal Warder Jr. received this award, as did Dan, as did 3 of our former presidents. And so, Dan, I think you've got the medal here and the certificate. I think maybe we could get the camera crew to zoom in on it. It is called the Paul Harris Fellow, and it's an interesting thing that women can be Paul Harris Fellows too in the Rotary Club. Let's just hold this up because Mr. Harris was the founding member of the Rotary, and as I say, they met for lunch and they talked about their common business interests, and so they kept it up. And so this means that $1,000 in Dan's name and the other 2 marshals and then 3 other gentlemen who received the same time. And this is one of the keystones of Rotary. Some clubs do other things, but especially in international understanding and exchange students and all of that sort of thing. So that's where we are. Are you getting a good shot of it? They're going to zoom in there in a minute and see Dan Clemson, the Rotary Foundation of Rotary International, is hereby named a Paul Harris Fellow. And it's interesting that there are people around in Rotary across the world that remember Mr. Harris and said that maybe he really didn't realize what an influence he would have. It was sort of to help them, but it's now spread around the world. We have 20,000 Rotary clubs in more than 150 countries of the world that are doing this kind of work.
Well, I'd like to ask this. Dan Clemson, how surprised were you when all of these good things happened to you at the annual banquet of the Rotary Club last week?
Well, you would think that as many people around this town that I know and as many people that knew about me receiving this award before I did, that somebody would have mentioned something to me about it.
I see.
I mean, if I knew somebody that was closely involved in this thing, you would think that they would have given me a hint, but I didn't have any idea, and that was, I believe, the purpose that Dewey had in mind,
Right.
Dewey Miller had in mind when he instigated these three presentations with Marshall Sutton, Marshall Warder Jr., and myself, and it was quite a thrill for us because the heritage of this award, as far as the Grand Prairie Club is concerned, has been that the awards were predominantly given to the past presidents of the club, and we had 7.
After you had worn yourself out completely, you know.
Just reward for works above and beyond the call of duty, and we were very surprised and very flattered to receive that award. There were 7 of us that received a Paul Harris Fellows that evening, which is a very unusually high number.
For our club, it was the most we ever had at one time. Usually they always, I've heard the WAG talk about the various service clubs, and they say, well, the Rotary owns the town, the Kiwanis run it, and the Lions have the fun. But we want the world to know that the Rotary Club in Grand Prairie, through this Paul Harris Fellow and through our projects, that we're also having fun, and we are involved in the community service in our town as well as around the world through the Paul Harris Fellow.
Well, Dan, we'd like to congratulate you for being one of the 3 young men that were singled out for this Paul Harris Fellowship, and also for the time that you give as a member of the Board of Education here in Grand Prairie, and as a director of the Chamber of Commerce and the YMCA and several other entities. And I'd like to always thank you for helping us with It's Happening in Grand Prairie, for without you in our mixer room, it wouldn't be possible, because only volunteers do our program. And I know that
before I leave, you know, Brother Bob over here, his ministry carries him far into the community, but one of the other activities that he's the president of at this time also is the American Heart Association, which he spends quite a bit of his time with, and we really appreciate Reverend Young and the things that he's doing in this community, and he's a tremendous representative of his church and congregation here in Grand Prairie, and we're proud of it.
I'd have been a guest host with you a long time if I'd known you were going to do that. But Dan is not telling you that he's also on the Heart Association and a subcommittee chairperson, and then in the Rotary Club, I conned him in my year. He has the toughest job, the club service avenue, which really is the nuts and bolts of keeping our club going. So I guess this is kind of the Dan and Bob appreciation hour. We appreciate the chance to
my hand's getting sore as yours.
That's all right.
Well, Mr. Bob, I know you must have a good word for the ladies that prepare the food for you all at Rotary. I think this is a tremendous act of faith, and would you say something about them, please?
Well, traditionally service clubs are orphans. They do not have buildings of their own. And our Rotary Club has been in the Ramada and been in the Safari Hotel. We're not giving them commercial breaks now. But a few years ago, through the city and the American Legion, we went down to the Veterans Memorial Center. And to have a meal is really kind of a tough job every Friday, because we have picayunish people and we have vegetarians and all sorts of things like that. But Mrs. Brown and her crew down there at the Veterans Memorial Center do a wonderful job week after week on Friday, not ever knowing. We usually have 110 or 15 people there. And recently she was in the local paper saying that she knows that chicken fried steak is going to go, but sometimes sausage or things like that are maybe not our favorite. But they do a wonderful job, and it's family style, and it's cheaper than the other clubs around. And when we have visitors from downtown Dallas or Irving, well, they always say, my, how you can get that much food for such little amount. So thank you, Ms. Brown, and all the workers down there at the Veterans Memorial Center. We appreciate it.
President Bob, we'd like for you to look out to the camera just before we leave and get ready for our next guest, and invite anyone that's interested to contact you about Rotary and and the meaningful part that it plays in our community.
Yes, we are quite proud in Grand Prairie of all of the service clubs. I think there's one on virtually every day at noon and a couple in the evening. And they're all dedicated. Each has a little different slant, and they're active and they're interested in the help that all of you might give out there. But if you're a business and professional person and you would like to serve your community and your world, why then I'd be glad to hear from you myself, and or Dan here is one of our directors, or Dewey Miller, who's our charter president, we'd all be glad to talk to you and tell you what Rotary involves and get your commitment to service above self in the community and around the world. So that's a good commercial here, as best I can do right now.
Well, thank you, President Young. Thank you, Dan Clemson, for being with us. And in a few minutes, we'll be right back with the Reverend Young and another guest for It's Happening. Before we get to our final guest for this presentation, we'd like to send out an H-E-L-P message. Help! That's what Judge Cameron Gray is crying, and he needs some lawnmower equipment. Now, as you know, Judge Cam Gray is responsible for the teen jury and for some of the volunteer work that they do through his program. He's used up both of his own personal lawnmowers and 2 lawnmowers that have been a gift to the program. So if you have a good, really working lawnmower machine and would like to make a contribution to a very worthy cause, or if you're a president or a member of a club that would like to make a contribution to Judge Gray and this program, please call him at 262-8818. This is a very worthy cause. He's been mowing the lawns or the cemetery lawns for us, both at the Vernoy Cemetery and for the Jordan Bowl Cemetery. He is helping several senior citizen ladies that are unable to mow their own lawns through this wonderful program. So if you would contact Judge Cameron Gray at 262-8818 or your speaker at 264-2234, let us hear from you if you can make a contribution to this very worthwhile cause. And now, the 1948 class reunion, the 35th reunion of the Grand Prairie High School class will be July the 9th. That's this coming Saturday at the Woodcrest Country Club. Contact Bob Tanner. His office is 387-3357, or his home phone number is 498-0346. This is the class of 1948 of the Grand Prairie High School. Now, those are our 2 most pertinent announcements, but we wanted to leave plenty of time for our last guest. Ken Thorpe comes to us as a very special person in the community. He's known for being the husband of Helen Hare Thorpe, who is real big in community service in Grand Prairie, but so is Ken. And Ken is somewhat semi-retired. He was, at least, until the Reverend Bob Young saw that he got to go to Washington with Helen about some sort of a prayer breakfast deal. Ken Thorpe, we're delighted to have you on It's Happening in Grand Prairie, and we want you to tell our viewing audience what has happened to you since you came back from that special prayer breakfast in Washington, because we interviewed you about that. I want them to know what you're doing now with that one entity that you received from Washington and from the good Lord.
Well, I'll be glad to tell you, I'm very happy about what Helen and I have done. When we came back, Helen sent for some tape recordings of what had happened up there in Washington, where they had been meeting for 40 years in prayer breakfast. And we played those tape recordings at Bob's church, and a group came there and listened to them. And out of that came a desire of that group of listeners to have a regular prayer breakfast here in Grand Prairie. So now every Tuesday morning, we meet at the Red R at 6:45 so that we can dismiss at 7:45 and go to work. And we have a regular prayer breakfast meeting in which we have a few minutes of prayer, a few minutes of eating, but basically we have a Bible discussion. And some of the most prominent members of that meeting are people like Ruthie Jackson sitting here on my left, and Reverend Bob Young sitting here on my right. And Helen and I are very pleased with what has started here from what came about 40 years ago back up there in the Senate. The Senate and the House each has a prayer breakfast. And they have a national prayer breakfast now, which is 30 years old. And we're grateful to Representative Frost, who, through Bob, got us to go there and organize what we're now doing.
Ruthie, I'd like to jump on what Ken was saying. Carol Shadden, as all of you know, is a part of our community as Martin Frost's associate. she called one day and she said the congressman is allowed to select one couple from his district to go, and said, would you have a suggestion? And I thought about one or two, and I talked to Catherine about it, and she said, well, you know, I think Ken and Helen Thorpe would love that. So I called over to the Thorpe house, and Helen jumped through the wire and said, yes, we would love to go. And lo and behold, then the people of the community and in our particular congregation got behind them. The Sunday before they left, they had a special service, and they went as our representatives, and then they were so excited about it that this has been a spinoff. And I have to confess, just with that storm yesterday morning, I forgot all about it, Ken, so I hope you prayed for me, because I missed it there.
We did.
All right, I'll be back next Tuesday.
We have about 27 members now. And welcome any of you. We welcome any of you to come and join us every Tuesday morning at 6:45.
And tell them again now where you meet, Ken.
The Red R.
The Red R,
1 hour, and you're free to go elsewhere.
That's a restaurant on West Main
West Main,
Street.
right.
Yes.
And you can just order coffee or water or one of those delicious rolls and have a time there. And the times that I've been there, there have been as many as 5 or 6 different denominations there. So we're proud of the prayer breakfast.
Well, we want you all to just sit tight for just one moment, because I believe our floor manager is going to bring someone up to gather behind President Bob Young of the Rotary Club, the Reverend Robert Young of the First United Methodist Church,
Wow.
because I believe he had some house guests that came for the Young reunion, and we want maybe our viewing audience to see and meet his 2 sisters that are here from Indiana.
From the state of Indiana.
Yes.
That's right.
And if our camera could readjust itself
All right.
and work in so that we can get a real good shot. All right.
Thank you, Ruthie, and
All right,
and
now
all
would
of
you
you. And
introduce
Ken,
them
I
for
don't
us?
want to take time, but sure enough, here on my right and your left, as you see, is my sister, Mrs. Clarice Shively from Mount Summit, Indiana. She's been in public school education, drama, and the whole bit, a graduate at Indiana University. And then immediately behind me is Mrs. Wilma Dieter from Rushville, Indiana. Rushville is the home of Wendell Wilkie, if you down here in Texas ever heard of him.
Excellent.
Back in 1940. And we had 24 out-of-city relatives for a family reunion, and so they'll be leaving to go back tomorrow, and one more maybe on Friday, and that concludes the family. I was the baby of 8 children. These are my 2 big sisters.
Oh,
2
I
of them
think
4, by
that
the way.
is so splendid. Congratulations to the Young group of the clan for coming together.
And listen, don't let me. Ken will get mad if he doesn't get to show these baby pictures before we go
yes.
off here. He's a new grandfather.
We're going to have to wind up. So, Ken, would you show the pictures of your new grandson that weighs 9 pounds and some odd ounces? Helen is very excited. This is Ruthie Jackson with the Chamber of Commerce, and this is the president of the Rotary Club, Bob Young, and we want you all to know that it's happening
In Grand Prairie.